Durbin, and I'd like to thank my colleague, Senator Klobuchar, for her long work on closing the boyfriend loophole, and to thank the other colleagues I have on this committee and other committees, Senators Murphy, Senator Cornyn, and many others who are working to move forward on this framework. Mr. Willingham, Mr. Schachter, your personal testimonies of loss and of tragedy are what is propelling this body to act. More funerals than weddings. To hear your stories of your father, your brother, your best friend being victims of gun violence is just another part of the wave of contacts, calls, emails, testimony that we've all gotten in the months since the horrific attacks in Buffalo and Uvalde. I've been flooded with messages from constituents begging for change and demanding Congress do something. I've heard from law enforcement, from pediatricians, from children, from educators, from parents who've been impacted by violence. Let me just briefly share two things I've heard. Dawn Hall, school social worker in the Brandywine School District, says she sees kids every day afraid to go out of their home or attend school because they fear if they go out, they won't return. Tracy Manza Murphy, known to me as the executive director of the Delaware Coalition Against Gun Violence, told me that communities as well as individuals experience trauma from gun violence, and the invisible wounds on communities scar generations. Doctor, your testimony amplifies that same point. We can't allow this carnage to continue to traumatize children, families, whole communities, whether it's daily gun violence in our streets, whether it's horrible losses through suicide, or it's mass shootings that seem to rivet the attention of the country. I am glad to be working with 20 colleagues on a framework, and I think this package of reforms doesn't move every solution we might hope, but it makes progress on a number of solutions that many of my colleagues have worked on for years, and it will save lives. I was glad through my congressional delegation to deliver a $2 million congressionally directed spending investment in community violence intervention programs in Wilmington, Delaware, where I'm from, and excited to see the support for President Biden's request for millions more for similar community violence intervention programmings. I've also been proud to work with Chairman Durbin and Senator Booker on the Preventing and Addressing Trauma with Health Services, or PATHS Act, to surge resources to mental health programs for communities experiencing trauma from gun violence. Let me ask two quick questions, if I might. Mr. Willingham, there's been a lot of discussion about mental health solutions to prevent gun violence, but I'd also like to focus on the mental health needs of those who've been indirectly impacted, who are the family members or community members. What kinds of services or programs do you think Congress should support to help children who've experienced gun violence live through and move past their trauma?
Thank you, Senator Coons, for the question. And just thank you for just acknowledging that, you know, the secondhand trauma that family, friends, and community members face is definitely important, and it often gets pushed aside and neglected. I think programs as such, like I mentioned in my testimony, like the Chicago Youth Program, for example, me and many other graduates have gone on and graduated from the program, but gone on to do great things in life. Programs like that ensure not only that young people have something to do in their spare time, but also ensure that you have the resources and that you have the network if you are unsure about things, or you need certain things at home, if you need extra resources for school supplies, if you need extra resources for clothing, different things like that, because these are things that goes in a young person's mind. If they're wearing shoes from Target and another student is wearing shoes from Foot Locker, those type of things go into young people's minds every single day. I hear it. I work in a school. I'm not too far out of high school, so I know firsthand about how it feels. But programs as such, like the Chicago Youth Program, definitely has made an impact on my life specifically. Being able to have not only just the physicians and different healthcare professionals to look up to, considering that's the career that I want to go into, but also having them as a resource to talk to about different situations in my neighborhood, and having accessibility to social workers and mental health professionals that can guide and steer me in the direction to make sure that I'm staying on the right track. I hope that answers your question. Senator.
Investing in both school-based and community-based
Yes,
mental health
exactly.
resources is something we're looking to do. And Mr. Schachter, I appreciated hearing about some of the school safety initiatives that you were advocating for that I will consider more seriously. And Chief, if I might briefly, given the brevity of the time I have left, could you just speak briefly to how gun violence prevention solutions, allowing law enforcement to seek a crisis intervention order, could be a critical part of community policing interventions to prevent further gun violence?
So thank you for that question, Senator Coons. Quite frankly, I've been one to stand up and say quite often that the blue suit or the blue uniform or whatever color uniform an officer is wearing is not the right uniform to respond to a mental health crisis. That's why communities, churches, faith-based, you name it, we need those resources available to keep the law enforcement officers available and accessible for violent crime issues versus mental health issues. So the Major City Chiefs Association is definitely an advocate of creating those opportunities for those resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator.